Jake Sullivan looked around the bridge of the spaceship and felt very small. He was only 5 feet and 8 inches tall, which made him the shortest person on the entire ship. Every other crew member was much bigger than him, and they never let him forget it. The ship was called Horizon's Edge, and it was flying deep into space to explore new worlds. Jake was the only human on board. All his crewmates came from different alien planets, and they all thought humans were weak and useless. Captain Thyron was the worst. He was a giant lizard man who stood 9 feet tall. Skin was covered in black scales that shined like metal. When he walked, the floor shook under his heavy feet. He had sharp teeth and yellow eyes that always seemed to be laughing at Jake. The science officer was named Cress. She looked like a huge bug with 6 arms and legs. She was 7 feet tall and could work on multiple computers at the same time. Her big bug eyes would stare at Jake like he was some kind of strange insect she wanted to study. Dr. Valen was the ship's doctor, came from a water world and looked like a cross between a fish and a person. He could breathe both air and water, and he moved with smooth, flowing motions that made Jake feel clumsy when he walked nearby. Lieutenant Zara was probably the meanest of all. She looked like a big cat that walked on 2 legs. She had yellow fur, pointed ears, and bright yellow eyes. She was almost 7 feet tall with muscles that could probably break Jake in half. She never missed a chance to remind everyone how small and weak humans were. Every day was the same for Jake. He would try to do his job, but his crewmates would whisper about him in their alien languages. His translator would pick up words like tiny, fragile, and mistake. They thought he could not understand them, but he heard everything. During training exercises, things got even worse. While the other crew members moved fast and hit hard, Jake struggled to keep up. His reflexes were slower, his strength was much less, and his endurance was not as good. The others would look at each other and shake their heads when they thought he was not watching. One day during a meeting, Lieutenant Zara spoke up loud enough for everyone to hear. "Why did the commanders send us such a small creature?" she asked, her cat eyes fixed on Jake with disgust. "We are going to dangerous places where only the strong survive. This human will just get in our way." Captain Thyron nodded his big lizard head. "Humans are known for being weak," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "They have no claws, no armor, no special abilities. I do not understand why Command thinks we need one on this mission." Jake sat quietly and listened to them talk about him like he was not even there. He had trained for years to get this job. He had studied alien fighting styles, learned about dangerous planets, and passed every test they gave him. But none of that seemed to matter to his crewmates. All they saw was a small, weak human who did not belong with them. Chief Engineer Ben Carter was the only other human on the ship, but he had joined them just a few weeks ago at their last stop. He was bigger than Jake and had more experience, so the aliens treated him a little better, but not much. The mission was simple in theory, but dangerous in practice. They were heading to a planet in the Kepler system that had never been explored. Before, the planet was covered in thick forests and tall mountains. Early scans showed that huge creatures lived there, bigger than anything anyone had ever seen before. Jake's job was to be the team's tactical advisor and study the alien life forms they found. He was supposed to figure out how dangerous the creatures were and help plan ways to deal with them. But his crewmates did not want his advice. They thought their size and strength were all they needed. As they got closer to the planet, the other crew members started planning the landing mission. They talked about which weapons to bring, where to set up camp, and how to defend themselves. But they did not include Jake in these discussions. When he tried to offer suggestions, they would nod politely and then ignore everything he said. When it came time to hand out equipment, Jake got the basic gear while everyone else got special armor and weapons made for their species. Captain Thyron got extra strong battle armor that made him look even more frightening. Lieutenant Zara got weapons that worked with her cat-like reflexes. Dr. Valen got underwater gear in case they found lakes or rivers. Chief Science Officer Cress got multiple tool belts for all her arms. Jake got a standard uniform, basic weapon, and a backpack full of research equipment. No special armor, no enhanced weapons, no extra protection, just the bare minimum needed to survive. The night before they were supposed to land on the planet, Jake stood alone in the observation deck, looking down at the world below. It was beautiful, but scary. The planet was covered in green forests that seemed to go on forever. Strange lights moved through the trees, and heat sensors showed creatures as big as their spaceship walking around down there. Ben. Carter found him there and came over to talk. "Do not let them get to you," Ben said, putting a hand on Jake's shoulder. "I have seen this before. Aliens always think humans are weak until they see what we can really do." Jake nodded, but did not feel very confident. "Look at me, Ben," he said. "I am barely taller than some of their children. Why am I supposed to prove myself against creatures that could step on me without noticing?" Ben smiled. "That is exactly why you will surprise them," he said. "They expect you to try to be strong like them. But humans are not strong, the same way aliens are strong. We are smart, we adapt, and we never give up. Those are the things that make us dangerous." Jake looked down at the planet again. Tomorrow, they would land, and he would have to prove that he belonged on this mission. His crewmates expected him to fail. They thought he would run away the first time they met something dangerous. But Jake had not come this far just to give up. He had dreamed of exploring new worlds since he was a child. He had worked harder than anyone else to earn his place on this ship. And even if his crewmates did not believe in him, he still believed in himself. The planet below looked wild and dangerous. The forests were full of creatures that could kill him easily. His crewmates thought he was too small and weak to survive down there. But Jake had something they did not understand. He had the heart of a human, and humans had survived on Earth by being clever, not by being the biggest or strongest. As he watched the alien world spin slowly beneath them, Jake made a promise to himself. He would show his crewmates that size did not matter. He would prove that humans belonged among the stars. And maybe, just maybe, he would earn the respect he had been working so hard to find. The landing was scheduled for the morning. In just a few hours, Jake would step onto an alien world and begin the greatest challenge of his life. He was scared, but he was also excited. This was his chance to show everyone what humans could really do. He just hoped he would live long enough to prove his point. The shuttle landed with a loud thump on the alien planet's surface. Jake felt his stomach jump as they touched down in a small clearing surrounded by trees that reached up toward the sky like giant green towers. Each tree was taller than any building he had ever seen on Earth, and their thick branches blocked out most of the sunlight. 8 crew members stepped out of the shuttle, including Jake. The air was thick and humid, making it hard to breathe at first. Strange smells filled his nose, some sweet like flowers, others sharp and bitter. Tiny particles floated in the air that made their equipment beep and buzz with confused readings. Captain Thyran immediately started giving orders in his deep, rumbling voice. "Set up the base camp here," he commanded, pointing to the center of the clearing with one of his massive clawed hands. "I want defensive positions around the perimeter. This planet is dangerous, and we cannot afford to take any chances." The crew moved quickly to follow his orders. Lieutenant Zara used her cat-like speed to climb up into the trees and set up lookout points. Chief Science Officer Kress used all 6 of her arms to assemble scanning equipment and communication devices. Dr. Valen began testing the air and water to make sure they were safe. Jake tried to help, but the others kept pushing him toward the less important jobs. When he offered to help set up the defense systems, Captain Thuran shook his large head. "You're too small to handle the heavy equipment," the lizard captain said. "Just stay out of the way and let the real soldiers do their work." So Jake found himself organizing supply boxes and checking. He felt frustrated and useless, but he tried to stay positive. At least he was here on an alien world. They had a basic camp set up with tents, equipment stations, and a defensive perimeter. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows through the forest. That was when they heard the first sounds. It started as a low, growling noise coming from deep in the woods. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps, lots of them, moving through the underbrush. Branches snapped and leaves rustled as something big approached their camp. "Defensive positions," Captain Thyran ordered, raising his powerful energy rifle. All the crew members grabbed their weapons and pointed them toward the edge of the clearing where the sounds were coming from. Jake drew his basic sidearm. knowing it was much weaker than the weapons his crewmates carried. His heart was beating fast, but he was not afraid. He was excited. This was their first contact with the planet's native life forms. What emerged from the forest made everyone gasp. A pack of creatures that looked like wolves, but much bigger. And with 6 legs, instead of 4, each one was the size of a small car, with thick fur that shimmered in the dying sunlight. Their leader was even bigger than the others, with silver fur and bright amber eyes that seemed very intelligent. The pack leader approached the edge of their camp slowly, 6 legs moving in a smooth, coordinated pattern. It stopped about 20 feet away and sat down on its haunches, studying the alien visitors with obvious curiosity. "Steady," Captain Thyron whispered through their communication system. "Wait for my command before firing." But Jake was not thinking about fighting. He was thinking about behavior patterns he had studied during his training. These creatures were not acting like mindless predators. They were curious, cautious, and intelligent. The pack leader was not showing any signs of aggression. He was trying to figure out what these strange new creatures were. Jake slowly put his weapon away and took a step forward. Immediately, his crewmates started talking through their coms. "Sullivan, what are you doing?" Lieutenant Zara hissed. "Get back here before that thing attacks you. You're too small to face that creature," Captain Thyron commanded. "Return to your position immediately." Jake ignored them and took another step forward. The pack leader's ears perked up with interest, but it did not move from its sitting position. Jake could see intelligence in those amber eyes, the same kind of intelligence he had seen in Earth dogs when they were trying to decide if a stranger was friend or enemy. Slowly, Jake reached into his pack and pulled out one of his food rations. It was a protein bar that smelled like meat. He unwrapped it carefully, making sure his movements were slow and non-threatening. The pack leader's nose twitched as it caught the scent of the food. Jake tossed the protein bar halfway between himself and the creature, then stepped back and waited. The pack leader looked at the food, then at Jake, then back at the food. After a long moment, it stood up and walked over to sniff the protein bar. The creature took a small bite, chewed thoughtfully, then ate the rest in one gulp. Jake and the pack leader stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds. Then the creature made a sound that was almost like a dog's bark, but deeper and more musical. It nodded its massive head once, then turned and led its pack back into the forest. The clearing was quiet for a long time after the creatures left. Jake's crewmates slowly lowered their weapons, all of them staring at him with confused expressions. "That was remarkable," Dr. Valen said, his fishy voice filled with surprise. "You established peaceful contact with a potentially dangerous species. Using nothing but food and body language." Chief Science Officer Cress clicked her mandibles together, which Jake had learned was a sign of deep thought. "The creature showed clear signs of intelligence and social organization," she said. "Your approach was much more effective than our defensive posture." Even Lieutenant Zara seemed impressed, though she tried to hide it. "You got lucky," she said, but her tone was not as harsh as usual. "That creature could have killed you easily, Captain." Thyron did not say anything, but Jake noticed that the big lizard was looking at him with something that might have been respect. It was the first time any of his crewmates had looked at him that way. Over the next 3 days, the crew worked to catalog the smaller creatures that lived in the forest. Jake's compact size turned out to be very useful for exploring caves and burrows that the larger crew members could not fit into. He found several new species of insects and small mammals that added valuable data to their research. But they were all aware that bigger predators lived deeper in the forest. They found massive claw marks on tree trunks, some as long as Jake's entire arm. They discovered footprints in the soft earth that were bigger than dinner plates, and sometimes late at night. They heard roars in the distance that made everyone's blood run cold. On the 4th day, their ground sensors started picking up seismic activity. Something very large was moving through the forest, and it was heading straight for their camp. With each step, the ground shook slightly. Birds flew away in panic, and the smaller animals they had been studying disappeared into their hiding places. Much bigger than those wolf creatures we met before. Captain Thyron ordered everyone to defensive positions again. They arranged themselves around the camp with their weapons ready, waiting to see what would emerge from the tree line. The footsteps got louder and louder. Trees began to sway and bend as something massive pushed through them. He was excited to see what kind of creature could be so large and powerful. When it finally stepped into their clearing, Jake's breath caught in his throat. The creature was like nothing he had ever imagined, even in his wildest dreams. It stood 30 feet tall, with muscles that rippled under dark skin marked with glowing patterns. It had 6 eyes arranged in pairs, and claws that looked like they could cut through steel. But what struck Jake most was not the creature's size or power. It was the intelligence in those 6 eyes as they looked directly at him. Then, incredibly, it lowered its enormous head in what could only be a nod of respect. Jake felt something pass between them in that moment, a recognition that he could not explain but somehow understood completely. This was not just a big animal. This was a thinking being, as smart as any person in the crew. And somehow it had chosen to acknowledge him above all the others. The creature turned and walked back into the forest as silently as it had come. The entire crew staring at Jake with new expressions of confusion, curiosity, and something that might have been the beginning of respect. After the giant creature left, everything at the camp felt different. Jake's crewmates kept asking him questions about what had happened, but he had no good answers to give them. He did not understand why the massive predator had nodded to him. Either, all he knew was that something important had passed between them. The other crew members were not making fun of Jake as much anymore. Instead, they watched him with curious eyes and asked his opinion about things they would have ignored before, but Jake could tell they were still not sure what to think about him. 2 days passed quietly. The crew continued their research, mapping the area and studying the smaller creatures. Jake spent most of his time exploring caves and tight spaces, where his size was actually helpful, found several new species, and even discovered some interesting rock formations that excited Chief Science Officer Kress. On the 6th day, since landing, their peaceful routine was shattered. The sound of terrified howling echoed through the forest, getting closer and closer to their camp. Jake recognized the voices immediately. It was the 6-legged wolf pack he had met on their first day. The pack burst into the clearing at full speed, their silver leader limping badly with deep cuts across his side. Blood dripped from the wounds, and his amber eyes were wide with fear and pain. The other pack members formed a protective circle around their injured leader, all of them looking back toward the forest with obvious terror. Behind them came a sound that made everyone's skin crawl. It was like a scream and a roar mixed together, but 100 times worse than either one alone. It was the sound of something that enjoyed causing pain and death. Through the trees crashed the most horrible thing Jake had ever seen. It was not really one creature, but seemed to be many creatures stuck together in the worst possible way. The thing stood 20 feet tall and moved on dozens of different legs. It had tentacles, claws, teeth, and eyes scattered all over its body in no pattern. That made sense. Multiple mouths opened and closed along its surface, each one filled with different kinds of teeth. Some looked like shark teeth, others like bear teeth, and some like nothing from any world Jake knew. Dozens of eyes stared in all directions, tracking every movement with hungry interest. "What is that thing?" Lieutenant Zara whispered, her cat, ears flat against her head in fear. Dr. Valen was scanning the creature with his medical equipment, his fish-like face pale with shock. "It appears to be some kind of parasitic collective organism," he reported in a shaky voice. "It has absorbed genetic material from multiple species and combined their most dangerous traits into one body." The horrible creature had been chasing the wolf pack, and now it was in their clearing. It let out another bone-chilling scream and began moving toward the injured pack leader, clearly seeing him as easy prey. Captain Thyron shouted orders for everyone to open fire. Energy beams and plasma blasts hit the creature from all sides, but most of the damage just seemed to bounce off its thick hide. The few wounds they managed to make healed almost instantly as the creature's body repaired itself. "Our weapons are not working," Chief Science Officer Kress reported, her 6 arms frantically operating different instruments. "Its regeneration ability is too strong." Jake watched his crewmates shooting at the monster with their powerful weapons, while getting nowhere. But he was also watching the creature itself, studying how it moved and reacted. He noticed something that the others had missed in their panic. When multiple hits landed on the creature at exactly the same time, its healing slowed down for just a moment. The creature was incredibly good at fixing damage, but only if the damage came slowly. If too many wounds appeared at once, it could not keep up. The monster was getting closer to the wounded wolfpack leader. Jake could see the fear in the creature's amber eyes as it tried to stay brave despite its injuries. The pack was loyal and brave, but they were no match for this nightmare thing. Jake made a decision that his crewmates later said was either the most courageous or the most stupid thing they had ever seen. He sprinted directly toward the monster, putting himself between the horrible creature and the injured wolfpack leader. His small sidearm looked like a toy compared to the weapons his crewmates carried. But Jake had noticed something else about the creature. It had many eyes and mouths, but they all seemed to work together as one big sensory system. If he could confuse that system, maybe his friends could land the coordinated attack needed to actually hurt it. "Sullivan, get back here," Captain Thyron roared through the communication system. "You're too small to fight that thing." Jake ignored the order and activated his weapon's rapid-fire mode. But instead of aiming for the creature's body like his teammates were doing, he targeted all the eyes and mouths he could see. Each shot was carefully aimed to cause maximum confusion rather than maximum damage. The creature stumbled as Jake's precise shots hit sensory organs all across its surface. Its many eyes blinked in confusion, and its mouths made angry sounds. As they tried to figure out where the attacks were coming from, the monster was used to dealing with big enemies that tried to overpower it, not small ones that moved fast and attacked its weak points. Jake kept moving, dodging between the creatures. Clumsy strikes while maintaining accurate fire. His smaller size let him avoid attacks that would have crushed his larger crewmates. The creature kept trying to grab him, but he was too quick and too small. "Pattern fire on my mark," Jake shouted into his comm system, diving to one side as the creature lunged for him. "Hit every visible mouth, and I cluster at the same time," now Jake yelled, rolling away from the confused monster. This time, when his crewmates fired their weapons, they aimed for the spots Jake had been hitting. Instead of just shooting at the creature's center, 8 different energy beams struck eyes and mouths. Simultaneously from all directions, the coordinated attack worked perfectly. The creature let out a final, horrible scream as black liquid sprayed from wounds that could not heal fast enough. It swayed back and forth for a moment, then crashed to the ground in a twitching heap. As the smoke cleared, Jake found himself standing over the fallen monster with his weapon still pointed at it. His hands were shaking from adrenaline, but he felt proud of what they had accomplished together. Behind him, the wolfpack leader had struggled back to his feet. The big creature was looking at Jake with something that definitely looked like respect and gratitude. The other pack members were making soft whining sounds that seemed friendly rather than threatening, but the most amazing moment came. When the massive apex predator appeared again at the edge of the clearing, Jake had not heard it approach this time, but suddenly it was there. Its 6 eyes focused entirely on him. The enormous creature walked slowly across the clearing, its footsteps making the ground shake slightly. It stopped directly in front of Jake and lowered its great head until they were at eye level. When it spoke, its voice was deep and rich with harmonics that made Jake's chest vibrate. "Little brother," the creature said, and Jake's translator worked hard to process all the meanings packed into those words. "You hunt with honor." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. The apex predator had not just acknowledged him this time, it had called him brother. In the creature's culture, that had to mean something very important. Dr. Valen was frantically scanning Jake with his medical equipment. "Remarkable," the doctor muttered. "Your tactical approach was specifically suited to defeating that creature type. Your precision attacks disrupted its neural network at critical points while our heavy weapons only caused surface damage." Chief Science Officer Kress was also studying the results of the battle. The creature's defensive systems were designed to counter overwhelming force, she said, her compound eyes reflecting new interest. "Your surgical strikes bypassed those defenses entirely." Even Lieutenant Zara seemed impressed, though she was trying to hide it. Your size actually helped you, she admitted reluctantly. You were too small and fast for that thing to track properly. Captain Thyron walked over to where Jake stood next to the fallen monster. The big lizard looked down at the small human with an expression Jake had never seen before. It might have been respect. Well done, Sullivan, the captain said in his deep voice. Your tactics saved all our lives today. Jake looked around at his crewmates, then at the wolf pack that was slowly approaching him, and finally at the massive apex predator that had called him brother. For the first time since joining this crew, he felt like he might actually belong here. The hunt was over, but Jake had a feeling that his real test was just beginning. After the apex creature called Jake's little brother, everything changed in the camp. The crew members who had been making fun of Jake's size were now asking him serious questions about how he had defeated the monster. How his small size and precise attacks had worked better than their big weapons. Dr. Valen spent hours studying the battle recordings and Jake's medical data. The fish-like doctor's findings surprised everyone, including himself. Your approach was perfectly designed to counter that specific threat, he told Jake during one of their evening meetings. The creature's body was built to absorb and heal from powerful attacks, but it could not handle multiple precise strikes to its sensory systems. Chief Science Officer Cress was even more interested in Jake's tactics. She used all 6 of her arms to operate different computers while she interviewed him about his fighting methods. The creature recognized hunting patterns in your behavior, she explained, her big compound eyes reflecting the light from her screens. This suggests that your species has natural predator instincts that other species can identify and respect. The apex creature, who had told them his name translated roughly to Stormwalker, began visiting their camp almost every day. He seemed very interested in Jake's equipment and methods, often watching from the forest edge as the human conducted his research work. During one visit, Stormwalker proved why he was the top predator on this planet. A rival creature that looked like a giant armored spider came into their territory, challenging Stormwalker's position. The spider was almost as big as Stormwalker and had thick armor plates covering its body. Jake and his crewmates watched from their camp as the 2 massive creatures fought. But the battle was not what anyone expected. Instead of just using brute force like the spider creature did, Stormwalker fought like a tactician. The apex predator used precise strikes, smart positioning, and even used the environment to his advantage. He lured the spider onto uneven ground where its many legs could not get good footing. Then he struck at the joints between the armor plates, targeting weak spots instead of trying to break through the thick armor. The battle was over quickly. Stormwalker had cut several of the spider's legs with surgical precision, making it impossible for the rival to fight effectively. The spider creature retreated back into the deep forest, leaving Stormwalker as the undisputed master of this territory. It's fascinating, Lieutenant Zara observed, her cat ears perked up with interest. Both you and Stormwalker fight like generals rather than soldiers. You think about the battle instead of just attacking with raw power. Jake began spending time talking with Stormwalker whenever the massive creature visited. These conversations were unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Stormwalker's intelligence was clearly equal to any member of the crew, but his way of thinking was shaped by concepts that humans could understand better than most aliens. Apex Predator thought in terms of territory, pack relationships, and survival strategies that made sense to Jake on a deep level. Through their talks, Jake learned that Stormwalker was not just a lone hunter, but the leader of an entire ecosystem. Every creature on the planet had a place in a complex hierarchy that Stormwalker maintained through a careful balance of respect, fear, and mutual benefit. You understand the true hunt, Stormwalker explained during one of their evening conversations. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed with different colors as he spoke, creating a light show that was beautiful and hypnotic. Others see only strength or weakness, big or small. But you see the hunt behind the hunt, the strategy that makes victory possible. The wolf pack had recovered under Dr. Valen's medical care. Their Silver leader, who Jake had started calling Silver, began following Jake around the camp like a loyal companion. Other forest creatures started approaching as well, drawn by some quality they recognized in the small human that even his own crewmates were still trying to understand. Small. Colorful birds would land on Jake's shoulders while he worked, like creatures would come out of their burrows to watch him pass by. Even some of the more dangerous predators would acknowledge him with respectful nods when their paths crossed in the forest. Captain Aaron noticed these changes and began including Jake in the important planning meetings. The Big Lizard's reports to Coalition Command grew more and more positive about Jake's contributions to the mission. Command specifically chose Sullivan for this assignment. Captain Thyron admitted to his senior staff during a private meeting, "Perhaps they understood something about human capabilities that we missed in our initial evaluations." Lieutenant Zara had also changed her attitude toward Jake. The cat-like alien still teased him sometimes. But now it was the friendly kind of teasing that crewmates shared, not the cruel mockery from before. She even started asking Jake for advice about dealing with the planet's predators. "You have a gift for understanding dangerous creatures," she told him one day while they were exploring a new section of forest together. "Even our people, who are natural hunters, do not have your instinct for reading predator behavior." Chief Science Officer Kress spent her time studying the relationship between Jake and the planet's wildlife. Her scientific mind was fascinated. By the way, creatures that should have seen him as prey instead treated him with respect. "There is something in your behavioral patterns that these creatures recognize as belonging to an apex predator," she explained to Jake while showing him her research data. "Your species may be smaller than many others, but you carry the instincts of a natural hunter." Dr. Vallon was most interested in the medical aspects of Jake's performance. His scans showed that Jake's stress levels during dangerous encounters were much lower than expected, and his reaction times actually improved when facing threats. "Your physiology is adapted for high-stress combat situations," the doctor observed. While other species rely on size or special abilities, humans seem to be designed for tactical thinking under pressure. Engineer Ben Carter watched all these developments with a knowing smile. He had seen this pattern before during humanity's integration into the Galactic Coalition. Other species always underestimated humans until circumstances forced them to see what humans were really capable of.
"I always forget,"
Ben told Jake one evening as they watched Stormwalker approach the camp for another visit. "Every alien species makes the same mistake. Look at us and see weak little creatures who should not have survived long enough to reach the stars." "But we did survive," Jake replied, understanding what his friend meant. "We survived everything Earth could throw at us, and we made it to space despite being smaller and weaker than most other species." "Exactly," Ben said. "And the reason we survived is the same reason Stormwalker calls you brother. We are apex predators too. We just hunt differently than everyone expects." As Stormwalker settled down near their camp for another evening conversation, Jake thought about what Ben had said. The massive alien predator had recognized something in Jake that his own crewmates had missed for weeks. Humans were not the biggest or strongest species in the galaxy, but they had something else. They had the intelligence to adapt, the courage to face threats much larger than themselves, and the instinct to protect others even when it put them in danger. Storm Walker's 6 eyes reflected the firelight as he looked at Jake with what could only be described as brotherhood. In the aliens' culture, calling someone brother meant recognizing them as an equal hunter, regardless of size or species. "Tomorrow we explore the northern mountains," Stormwalker said, his deep voice carrying undertones of excitement. "It'o, our old places there, dangerous places. But with a hunting brother, even the ancient dangers can be faced." Jake felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with respect. Stormwalker was inviting him to explore parts of the planet that were too dangerous for normal expeditions. It was both an honor and a test of the brotherhood they had formed. Looking around, he had proven himself in their eyes. But more importantly, he had found his place among the hunters of this strange and wonderful world. The real adventures were just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first landed on the alien planet. Life at the camp had settled into a comfortable routine of research, exploration, and evening conversations with Stormwalker. Jake had earned the respect of his crewmates and formed bonds with the local wildlife that amazed everyone, including himself. Then everything changed in a single moment. The emergency alarm on their communication system started screaming with urgent beeps. Captain Thyron rushed to the main console, his large clawed hands working quickly to decode the incoming message. His yellow eyes grew wide with concern as he read the data. "We have a distress call," the captain announced to the assembled crew. "Another Coalition research ship has crashed on the far side of this continent. The automated message says they are under attack by creatures that are impossible to fight or escape from." Jake felt his stomach drop. Another crew was in trouble, possibly dying while they sat safely in their comfortable camp. The rescue mission would be dangerous, but they could not just leave their fellow explorers to die. Dr. Valen pulled up maps of the continent on his medical scanner. "Crash site is located in a deep valley system 6 hours away by shuttle," he reported. "The area is completely outside our mapped territory and beyond the range of Stormwalker's domain." Lieutenant Zara studied the topographical data with her sharp cat eyes. "The terrain looks very dangerous," she observed. "Deep valleys, extensive cave systems, and no clear landing zones near the crash site. We would be flying into unknown territory." With no intelligence about local threats, Chief Science Officer Kress added her analysis using data from multiple instruments. "Long-range sensors detect massive life signs moving through underground tunnel networks," she said, her 6 arms working different controls simultaneously. "Whatever creatures live in those valleys, they are much larger than anything we have encountered here." Captain Thyron faced a difficult decision. The horizon's edge could reach the crash site quickly, but sending a rescue team would mean venturing into hostile territory, where they knew nothing about the local predators or environmental hazards. Jake studied the geographical information on his portable scanner. The crash site was located in a valley surrounded by rock formations that suggested extensive cave systems. If the survivors were dealing with creatures that lived underground, normal Coalition combat strategies would be almost useless. "I recommend a small rescue team," Jake suggested during the emergency planning meeting. "Large groups will be seen as invasion forces by any territorial predators in the area. A smaller unit focused purely on rescue will have better chances of avoiding unnecessary conflicts with local wildlife." Stormwalker had been listening to their discussions through the translation devices Dr. Valen had built. The massive predator's reaction to news of the rescue mission surprised everyone present. "The deep valleys hold old anger," Stormwalker warned, his harmonious voice carrying notes of genuine fear and concern. "Creatures there do not follow the natural balance. Consume without purpose, destroy without need, kill without honor." This was the first time any of them had heard Stormwalker express something resembling fear or uncertainty. Apex Predator was worried about what lived in those valleys. The rescue mission would be far more dangerous than their initial projections suggested. "You have been to those valleys before?" Jake asked, using the translation device to communicate directly with Stormwalker. "Long ago, when I was young and foolish," Stormwalker replied, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with dark colors that Jake had learned indicated distress. "I lost many pack brothers to the things that live in the old places. They are not natural creatures. They're weapons left behind by those who came before us." Captain Thyron made his decision after consulting with his senior staff. 4-person rescue team would attempt to reach the survivors, himself for leadership and heavy combat capability, Jake for his tactical expertise in predator psychology, knowledge Dr. Valen for medical support, and Chief Science Officer Kress for her technical skills. They would travel light and fast, carrying only essential equipment. Their mission was extraction, not exploration or combat. Get in, find the survivors, and get out as quickly as possible. As they prepared to depart, Stormwalker approached Jake one final time. The massive creature's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in complex sequences that Jake had learned indicated deep, important communication rather than casual conversation. "You go beyond the balance into chaos," Stormwalker said, his 6 eyes fixed on Jake with what looked like worry. "But you carry the true hunt within you. Trust the hunt, little brother. When sight fails and strength is not enough, the hunt will guide you to victory." The flight to the crash site took them over terrain that grew increasingly hostile and strange. Twisted spires of rock jutted from landscapes that looked scarred by some ancient catastrophe. Their instruments detected massive life signs moving through cavern systems that honeycombed the entire region like a network of underground highways. They found the crashed research vessel wedged between 2 canyon walls with its hull partially buried under rockfall. The ship was called the Explorer, and survivor signals were still coming from inside the wreckage. But the area around the crash site showed clear signs of an ongoing siege. Creatures unlike anything in Coalition databases had turned the canyon into their hunting ground. They looked like a horrible cross between giant centipedes and armored tanks. Each one was 30 feet long and covered in bone plates that deflected energy weapons. Dozens of them scuttled across the canyon walls while more emerged from cave openings. "This is impossible," Chief Science Officer Kress whispered as she studied the creatures through her scanning equipment. "Their exoskeleton density should make movement at that speed physically impossible. They're violating basic principles of biomechanics and physics." Jake watched the creatures' movement patterns and behavior with growing understanding and dread. These were not natural predators operating within an ecosystem like the creatures in Stormwalker's territory. They moved with mechanical precision, showed no signs of intelligence or self-preservation, and seemed focused purely on destruction. "They are weapons," Jake announced grimly to his teammates. "Biological weapons that someone or something created and then lost control of. It is why Stormwalker was afraid. These things do not follow natural laws because they were not designed by nature." Dr. Vallen's medical scans confirmed Jake's assessment. "Their biological signatures are completely artificial," he reported with growing alarm. "They have been engineered to be perfect killing machines with no other purpose or need." The rescue mission had become something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. But 23 Coalition personnel were trapped inside that wreckage, and their distress calls were growing weaker with each passing hour. People were dying while they watched from safety. Jake looked at his three companions, beings who had mocked his size and questioned his capabilities just weeks before. Now he saw something he had never expected to find among the stars. He saw family members who trusted him enough to follow him into the most dangerous situation any of them had ever faced. Captain Thyron checked his heavy combat armor and weapons one final time. "What is your assessment, Sullivan?" he asked, using Jake's last name with the respect reserved for fellow warriors. "Lieutenant." Zara and Chief Science Officer Kress had remained at the ship to provide support, but they were monitoring the communication channels. Even they were waiting to hear Jake's tactical analysis. Jake studied the canyon, the creatures, and the trapped ship. He thought about everything Stormwalker had taught him about the hunt, about balance, and about facing impossible odds with intelligence instead of brute force. "These things were built to kill everything they encountered," Jake said finally. "But they were designed to fight normal enemies using normal tactics. We are going to do something they will not expect." Dr. Vallen activated his medical equipment and emergency supplies. "What do you have in mind?" Jake smiled grimly and checked his basic sidearm one more time. "We are going to hunt the hunters. We are going to show these artificial monsters what real predators can do." The final battle for the survivors was about to begin, and Jake felt the predator instincts that had carried humanity to the stars, awakening fully for the first time since leaving Earth.